Have you ever made a $100,000 mistake? I work for a company that produces ink. I was recently transferred to the shipping department. While unloading a truck in the dark, I punctured a 1-ton container of water-soluble ink. The entire contents spilled out in seconds. The entire truck, the gate, and the yard outside turned blue. Even though the ink was water-based, it still contained pollutants, so the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, had to be called in because some of the liquid went down the drain. The special company that was called in to clean it up has been digging up the drains and surrounding land for 3 weeks now, trying to remove the contamination. The situation has also been exacerbated by a downpour that has been going on for several days. This situation broke me down, to put it mildly. I didn't go to work for 2 days and had a nervous breakdown. Later, I got a call asking if I was going to quit. The hint was that if I did, criminal charges could be filed against me. I don't know how likely that is, but I could file a counter-complaint for lack of lighting in the warehouse and dim forklift headlights. After almost 3 weeks, I can finally look back and even laugh a little at what happened. One time I was mopping the floor of an art gallery. I hit my butt and broke a $250,000 glass sculpture. It was okay. I didn't get fired. But as punishment, I was the one who had to break the news to the sculptor. My boss loved to tell that story, and I wanted to die of shame. I was working as a conductor on a railroad, and because of me, 2 locomotives derailed at one of the busiest railroad junctions on the east coast of the United States. I blocked 2 major lines and paralyzed the entire depot for 11 hours. The losses for the railroad company amounted to $3.2 million. So your mistake is just kindergarten compared to my fault. I made a $70,000 mistake by forgetting to turn off my cloud servers before a long weekend. I stupidly forgot to hit the off button. I turned the entire Amazon Japan website into for a while. I was responsible for publishing the catalog. There was a bug in the core software, so I manually started the publishing process, but didn't use UTF-8 encoding. Ended up broke everything. Found the bug in 5 minutes, but it took hours to republish. Ended up rendering the Japanese site useless on one of my busiest days. Oops. We fixed a bunch of stuff after that fiasco, though. Despite that, I still had a very successful career. This incident didn't happen to me. I was an electrician at an ice cream factory. Some guy mixed up the hoses and connected a container of strawberry juice instead of strawberry jam for a whole production line of fruit popsicles. The product was edible, of course, but you couldn't sell it because it didn't meet the standards. It didn't have whole pieces of fruit, etc. And since the manufacturing process had already started, you couldn't just go and change the ingredients mid-cycle. I ended up watching container after container after container after container after container after container of popsicles being sent to the trash, where it was simply melted down and poured down the drain. $350,000 went down the drain, simply because somebody hooked up the wrong hose. I can tell you that management was, to say the least, not thrilled. Lol. Never found out who did it or if that person still works there. I work in the oil industry. Every mistake costs $100K. That's not a joke. I do shipping for one of the largest mobile distributors in the world. Most tanks have a 275-gallon capacity, about 1040 liters. The average cost of bottled oil is $15 a gallon. If you pour in the wrong product, you have to pump out all 275 gallons, then pour back in the right product, plus travel time, payroll, truck costs, recall costs, recall costs, recall costs. And those are the cheap fails. I work at Coca-Cola in the syrup department. I was making a batch of cola one day. Considering it's our most popular product, we bottle it in every possible format, so the batches are huge. The most expensive component is the concentrate. It comes in 50-gallon drums and is pumped through a pressure system that feeds it into a blending tank and then into the main storage tank. So, I didn't notice that the janitor who sterilizes the equipment had left the drain valve open. It's always closed by default. As a result, when I hooked up the flavor drums, all the concentrate stupidly went down the drain. About $80,000 down the drain. The company just wrote off the loss, and I didn't suffer any serious consequences. But within a couple of days, they introduced new standard operating procedures, SOPs, with additional inspection steps and sign-offs. My colleagues were not happy about it, but it hasn't happened again since. I know a dude who forgot to turn off the water when he was filling up a swimming pool that was located downtown. The water flooded the elevator shaft. That was about 15 years ago, including electrical damage and flooding. The total damage was between $500,000 and $1 million, and we're not even accounting for inflation. I once deleted the schedule for a $3 billion construction project for a casino. Typically, a project schedule includes 2,100 tasks, for example, for a standard house or a 10-unit apartment complex. This same schedule contained more than 5,000 tasks with connections, dependencies, and all the necessary details. This document coordinated the work of thousands of people, builders, electricians, plumbers, engineers for the next 4 years. And I deleted it. I panicked wildly when I told my boss about it. But she just gave my computer to the IT department and they found the deleted file. Bosses are usually not as worried as they seem. They know how to solve problems, and covering their asses is their job. I hope someday you'll laugh about this case with your superiors. I accidentally dug up some multicolored cable, the repair of which cost a huge amount of money at about $50,000 per hour. But it wasn't my fault. I called ahead of time, clarified everything, and got all the necessary permits. Sometimes shit happens, and at times like that, you're especially glad you're just a worker bee and not the owner of the hive. I was training a new warehouse worker on his first day out of school and forklift certification. I told him to pick up a pallet and check in the system where it needed to go. He picked the first pallet that came up, which was pretty high up, and it needed to be placed on the topmost shelf, 10 feet high. He picked it up correctly, looked at the cameras, placed it correctly, and started to pull back. But in doing so, he put the forks down too soon. As a result, the tips of the forks caught the beam at the bottom and lifted up slightly. It was enough to move the pallet and drop it. I sighed, smiled, and said, "Great, now I'll show you how to fill out an incident report." What was on the pallet? One server system, one that you could turn on with one button and start using immediately. Cost, about $150,000. The man was so nervous that he took a sick leave in the afternoon, but returned later that week. We talked and forgot about the incident. He went to university in the fall, but the next summer he came back to work for us, and then came to work part-time in his spare time. He became a great employee. Shit happens. I know a guy who had a $100,000 screw-up at work. It was an oil company. We were running an oil storage facility at the time. Dude opened the wrong valves and sent incompatible products into a 400,000-liter tank, ruining both what was already inside and what had just been pumped in. I think it was motor oil mixed with transmission oil or something like that. Everything had to be disposed of, and the tank had to be completely cleaned, which cost a fortune. When I worked at a fuel terminal, a dude opened the wrong valve while a ship was draining and funneled hundreds of thousands of gallons of gasoline into a 2.5 million gallon tank of diesel. Luckily, we noticed before the mixture got into the trucks. Otherwise, we would have had to replace diesel engines across 2 states. The final amount of damage was kept secret, but I heard it was over $1 million. We sold the tainted product as blended fuel. The residue was pumped back into the ship, and it went to be recycled. The guy who screwed up didn't get fired, but they called in contractors to change the piping so it wouldn't happen again. I recently had my first automobile accident in 13 years of driving a truck, and it was 100% my fault. I rear-ended another car, and I was driving a freaking passenger car that my company had rented for me to go help another branch. I got a ticket for failure to maintain a safe distance. The full extent of the problem didn't come to my attention until a week later. I was sitting on my day off playing Civilization 6. Everything was fine, and I even won the game. But then I had the worst panic attack of my life. I started throwing up. My heart was pounding. My chest was tight. I was suffocating. I couldn't even get a Xanax pill out of the bottle because my hands were shaking so badly. I had to scatter them in the sink, and I ended up throwing up the first pill. I once made a mistake for about $550,000. I worked in a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility and was in charge of a line that produced hyper-specialized drugs. One such drug is a medication used in heart surgery that costs $1,000 for a 100 milliliter package. I was involved in setting up and managing the manufacturing process on the machine that filled these packages with the solution. According to FDA sanitation requirements, if the solution in the piping stands still for more than an hour, the entire piping system must be flushed. That's a minimum of 55 liters of solution. To avoid this flushing, I had to manually fill the bags during the downtime to keep the solution from stagnating. One day the line stopped, and I was working in another part of the shop at the time. There was a backlog, and there were not enough workers in my position. I had forgotten that I had to manually fill the bags while the line was inactive. When we restarted production, I had to drain all the solution from the pipes, a total of 55 liters. Let's do the math. 1 liter equals sign 1,000 milliliters. Each 1,000 milliliters equals sign 10 100 milliliters bags. Each bag costs $1,000. Total 55A 10 times 1,000 equals $550,000 sent to nowhere. For me, this is a colossal sum. We were producing $15 million worth of drugs per production shift. So losing $550,000 was not such a disaster for the company. We were working on a line of 19 operators, and we were making $15 million in profit in 8 hours. And we were paid $19 an hour. So I'm not sorry at all that I lost some of the company's profits.